In 1980, China was poor. Not developing country poor, truly poor. The average Chinese citizen earned less than $200 a year. Most people lived in rural villages. Factories were rare. Cars were almost non-existent. And the country had just come out of decades of economic chaos. Fast forward a few decades. China now produces about 30% of the world's manufactured goods, more than the United States, Germany, and Japan combined. Your phone, your laptop, your clothes, your kitchen appliances, your furniture, your children's toys. There's a good chance they were made in China. So the obvious question is, how did one country go from widespread poverty to becoming the factory floor of the entire planet? Because it wasn't luck. It was a very deliberate system, and it changed the global economy forever. To understand the story, we have to go back to the late 1970s. At the time, China's economy was almost completely closed off from the world. The government controlled nearly everything. Factories were inefficient, productivity was low, and foreign companies were basically banned. Then in 1978, a new leader came to power, Deng Xiaoping. Deng looked at China's economy and came to a simple, uncomfortable conclusion. The system wasn't working. China had hundreds of millions of workers, but almost no productive jobs. So Deng made a radical decision. He would open the door. Not completely, not democratically, but strategically. Instead of changing the entire country overnight, China experimented with something new called special economic zones. These were specific cities where foreign companies were invited to build factories. Taxes were low, regulations were lighter, land was cheap, and most importantly, labor was extremely cheap. One of the first of these zones was a small fishing village called Shenzhen. In 1980, Shenzhen had about 30,000 people. Today, it has more than 17 million. It's one of the largest manufacturing hubs on Earth. But cheap labor alone doesn't explain China's rise. Plenty of countries have cheap workers. What China built was something much more powerful, an entire ecosystem designed for manufacturing. First came the workers. Hundreds of millions of people moved from rural villages into cities. China built housing, roads, ports, and industrial parks at a pace the world had never seen. Factories could suddenly access massive pools of labor. Second came infrastructure. China poured trillions into highways, ports, railways, and power plants. Moving goods became incredibly efficient. A factory in inland China could ship products to the coast, load them onto a cargo ship, and send them to Los Angeles or Rotterdam within weeks. Need a new phone design? In China, you can redesign it, prototype it, source parts, and start mass production in weeks. In many other countries, that process can take months or even years. This manufacturing density created a kind of industrial gravity. Companies didn't just choose China because it was cheap. They chose China because everything was already there. Workers, parts, ports, engineers, logistics. It was the fastest way to build almost anything. But there was another piece of the puzzle most people overlook: currency. For years, China intentionally kept its currency, the yuan, relatively weak compared to the US dollar. This made Chinese exports cheaper for the rest of the world. Imagine you're an American company choosing where to manufacture. If the same product costs $10 to make in China and $18 somewhere else, the decision becomes obvious. China understood this dynamic very well. Export growth became the engine of the economy. And then something even bigger happened. In 2001, China joined the World Trade Organization. This was a turning point. Suddenly, global companies could invest in China with far fewer restrictions. Tariffs dropped, trade exploded, factories multiplied. From 2001 to 2010, China experienced one of the fastest industrial expansions in human history. Entire cities appeared almost overnight. Steel production surged, cement production surged, energy consumption surged. China eventually began producing more steel than the rest of the world combined. And the money followed. Exports flooded global markets, foreign investment poured in, millions of people moved into the middle class. Between 1980 and today, China lifted over 800 million people out of poverty. That's the largest poverty reduction in human history. But there's an irony hiding inside this success. China didn't just become the world's factory. It became deeply dependent on being the world's factory. And that creates risks, because the system works only if the world keeps buying. For decades, Western countries happily outsourced manufacturing to China. It lowered costs, companies made bigger profits, consumers got cheaper products. Everyone benefited. Until recently. Now governments are starting to worry about something uncomfortable: supply chain dependence. During the COVID pandemic, global shipping slowed down, factories closed, ports got backed up.
Suddenly, countries realized how much of their economy depended on Chinese manufacturing. Everything from electronics to medical supplies to critical industrial components. And that triggered a shift. Companies began talking about reshoring and friendshoring. In simple terms, moving factories out of China. Not all at once, but gradually. Some production is already moving to places like Vietnam, India, and Mexico. At the same time, China's own economy is changing. Labor is no longer as cheap as it once was, wages have risen dramatically, the population is aging, and geopolitical tensions are growing, which means the model that built China's rise may not look the same in the next 20 years. But the scale China achieved is still staggering. Today, China manufactures high-speed trains, smartphones, solar panels, electric vehicles, drones, and advanced electronics. The factory that once produced cheap toys and plastic goods has moved much further off the industrial ladder. And yet the original question still lingers. Did China become the world's factory because it was cheap? Or did it become powerful because it built the most efficient industrial machine the world has ever seen? Because if it's the second one, then replacing that machine may be far harder than most countries expect. And the real question isn't whether China built the world's factory. The real question is, what happens to the global economy if that factory ever slows down?